She smuggled 2,500 children in suitcases out of the Warsaw Ghetto. She kept their names buried in a jar beneath an apple tree. The Nazis tortured her, broke her bones, but she never spoke a word. Who was this woman? And why don't we hear her name more often? Who was Irena Sendler? Irena Sendler was a Polish social worker and nurse born in 1910 just outside of Warsaw. Her father, a doctor, taught her something she would carry for the rest of her life. If you see someone drowning, you must jump in and try to save them, even if you don't know how to swim. When the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, this lesson became her mission. By 1940, the Germans had sealed off the Warsaw Ghetto, trapping over 400,000 Jews in less than 3.5 square kilometers. Hunger, disease, and fear consumed the streets. Irena, working under the cover of a health department role, found a way in. She wore a nurse's uniform, carried a medical bag, and claimed she was there to inspect for typhus, a disease the Nazis feared more than rebellion. But what she actually carried was hope, and what she smuggled out were lives. How did she do it? Irena Sendler's rescue mission didn't begin with a grand plan. It started with access, and with the courage to use it. In 1940, the Nazis walled off a section of Warsaw and crammed over 400,000 Jews into what became known as the Warsaw Ghetto. Irena, then a 30-year-old social worker, had a legitimate reason to enter. She worked for the Warsaw Health Department and held a special permit to inspect for contagious diseases, particularly typhus. The Nazis feared typhus outbreaks might spread beyond the ghetto and into the general population, so ironically, they allowed health workers inside. But Irena's real work had nothing to do with disease control. She joined a secret organization known as Żegota, the Polish Council to Aid Jews, and began building a vast underground network. Her first challenge was logistics. How do you smuggle a child out of a sealed ghetto under armed surveillance? She and her collaborators tested many methods. Some children were carried out in ambulances, sedated and disguised as sick or unconscious patients. Others were hidden in tool boxes, burlap sacks, or even under stretchers. Infants were sometimes smuggled in bottom drawers of carts used to transport goods in and out of the ghetto. On a few occasions, children were hidden between bricks in the walls of delivery wagons, so long as they didn't cry. They even used the courthouse that stood on the edge of the ghetto. One side faced the Jewish zone, the other opened into the Aryan side of Warsaw. Through bribes and connections, Irena's team arranged for children to cross through the building, one side to the other, under forged documents or hidden in the robes of sympathetic court officials. Once out, the danger didn't end. They needed safe houses, places to hide the children, often with non-Jewish Polish families, orphanages, or religious institutions. Irena coordinated placements across dozens of locations. Each child was given a new Polish name and a fabricated background. Even the nuns at certain convents risked their lives to shelter Jewish children, raising them as Catholics to avoid suspicion. But Irena didn't want these children's original identities to be lost forever. For every child she helped, she wrote down their real name, their parents' names, and where they were placed. She scribbled this on thin tissue paper, sealed it in jars, and buried the jars in a garden under an apple tree at her friend's house just outside Warsaw. It was a fragile system. Any one failure, a crying child, a disloyal collaborator, a misplaced name, could destroy dozens of lives. But for over 3 years, she made it work. And by the end of the war, she and her network had rescued around 2,500 Jewish children. She was caught and tortured. By late 1943, Irena Sendler's work had drawn attention. The Nazis had long suspected that a smuggling network was operating inside Warsaw, but they didn't know who was behind it. Żegota was careful. They used code names, safe houses, and rotated couriers constantly, but secrecy can only go so far. Then one day, in October 1943, the Gestapo received a tip. It's still unclear who betrayed her. Some believe it was a collaborator under duress. Others think a document may have been intercepted. Whatever the cause, the Gestapo arrived at Irena's apartment without warning. She was arrested immediately. In her possession, they found a list of addresses, not the names of the children. Those were still buried in the jars, but enough to raise suspicion. She was taken to Pawiak prison, a place infamous in Warsaw for torture and executions. For weeks, she was interrogated. The Gestapo wanted the names of her co-conspirators. They wanted the names of the children she had saved and where they were hidden. But Irena refused to speak. They broke her feet. They broke her legs. They beat her until she lost consciousness, but she told them nothing. When physical torture failed, they tried psychological terror. They brought her fake messages claiming her loved ones had been captured. They threatened to round up more people. Still, she stayed silent. Eventually, they sentenced her to death. But Żegota wasn't finished with her. Using the same underground network Irena had once helped organize, they bribed a German officer with a large sum of money. Days before her scheduled execution, he quietly removed her name from the list and arranged for her to be shot while escaping. Instead, she was left unconscious in a forest, alive, but barely. When she woke up, she was officially dead. The Nazis published a death notice with her name. Irena Sendler ceased to exist on paper. From that point on, she went underground, continuing her resistance under a false identity, even as her body was still healing. And then forgotten, but not forever. After the war ended in 1945, Irena Sendler returned to her work as a social worker, now walking with a limp from the torture she had endured. But in Soviet-controlled Poland, her heroism was not celebrated. It was silenced. The organization she had worked with, Żegota, was tied to the exiled Polish government, now considered an enemy of the communist state. Irena was interrogated by the secret police multiple times. Though never imprisoned again, she was closely watched. She didn't speak publicly. She didn't write a memoir. She simply kept working, often with disabled or orphaned children, and raised her own family in Warsaw. Meanwhile, the names she had buried in jars slowly made their way back into the world. After the war, she returned to the tree, unearthed the jars, and began cross-referencing names, trying to reunite children with surviving relatives. Sometimes she succeeded. In many cases, it was too late. For decades, her story remained largely unknown. Even among Holocaust historians, her name was barely mentioned. Until 1999, when a group of high school students in Kansas stumbled upon a brief reference to her. Their project turned into a play, Life in a Jar. They met Irena, then in her late 80s, and helped bring her story to light around the world. Almost overnight, she went from obscurity to global recognition, honored by Yad Vashem, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, awarded by countless institutions, but she never accepted the title of hero. Her response was always the same: I could have done more. Yet her legacy speaks for itself. Many of the children she rescued grew up without knowing they were Jewish, until Irena's lists helped them rediscover their names, their identities, their families. Today, tens of thousands of people across generations owe their lives to her courage, and still, she never claimed the credit. I was not alone, she insisted. There were many others who helped. True, she had collaborators, but Irena was the heart of it all. She remembered every child by name. She ensured they were not lost to history. In 2008, Irena Sendler passed away at age 98. At her funeral, Many of those in attendance were descendants of the children she saved. Some carried photographs, others held names written on paper, just like the ones buried so long ago in jars. Thousands of lives exist today because she chose to act, not with force, but with quiet, steadfast bravery. And that's why she's worth knowing.